Hello and welcome to the 9th episode of Watchtower in Focus, the show that zooms in on all things JW, bringing the governing body and its teachings and policies under microscopic scrutiny. Joining me for this episode are my regular co-hosts Covert Fade and John Redwood, and this episode also sees the return of JW Survey's survey editor, Chloe. Hello to all of you.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Lloyd. Good to see everybody.
You were all taken by surprise by my not introducing you separately. I'm sorry about that. And we also have joining us for this special Pillow Talk episode, an ex-Bethelite. I'm not going to reveal too much about him, but he has been in Bethel for a number of years, and he left as recently as the JW broadcasting era. So he's fairly recent. He's going under the pseudonym Kamden for this broadcast, for this episode. So Kamden, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So we're hoping that you can help us kind of make sense of the madness of what we'll be discussing. Where do we even begin, guys? Obviously, you know, it goes without saying that we're talking about insane material. I've obviously had a lot to say about it on my channel, so I'm kind of really more interested in hearing your perspectives, and we're going to be listening to some voicemails as well later. But I'm going to kind of leave it as a free-for-all. What do you guys make of it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the person or persons that we won't mention who has leaked this information to us. And, you know, I think as our listeners will attest to, the fact is that Watchtower's got a number of holes in their system right now. And we have so many awakened JWs within the network of the organization that are people who are still active, that the leaks are coming from multiple sources. So along those lines, we received 2 talks, one by Gary Bro, who's the head of the service department, and Walls, who's the personnel. And both of these are high-ranking governing body helpers. They're on the list of various committees that are assisting the governing body. So they've been in Bethel service for a long time. And so it seems they've got the short end of the stick when it came to giving the talk or talks to Bethelites. So I guess the short summary would be that Gary Bro's talk is directed at Bethelites. For people that are unaffiliated, Bethel is the name of the world headquarters in whatever country you live in, and there's multiple Bethels in America and also other countries. And so each time a full-time Bethelite is invited to join the ranks of Bethelites, they are inducted into what's called it's the what is it called, the school for
it's Bethel entrance training or something
Bethel
like that, isn't it?
School. Yeah. So traditionally they're given speeches by various high-ranking Bethelites, guys like Ralph Walls, who's in charge of personnel to begin with, and then Gary Bro and other service personnel. But they're given talks about how to conduct their lives, what kind of music to listen to, what to do, what not to do, how many items they can have on their desk at Bethel, these kind of things. And among those things, now we have 2 very poignant talks on the topics of masturbation, as well as some other things we're going to get into, including pillows. So I don't want to throw too many spoilers in there. I'll let the rest of you guys comment on that. But
yeah, we don't want to blow our load too quickly.
Oh, we're starting already, aren't we?
But I guess I'm taking a few too many assumptions. Let's just say if you haven't seen the videos already, you absolutely need. I mean, you just need to see them. I'm sorry. Just pause this video right now. Go and go. It's probably easiest to go on the JW survey article that Covert you wrote. I just sense, not just from reading your article, but also we've been in touch over the past week, I just sense that you're dumbfounded by this kind of own goal that Watchtower has scored with these videos.
Yeah, it really rubbed me up the wrong way. It was, no, to be honest, I mean, this has been a highlight of the. I'll start this again. So I think I actually tweeted this a couple of days ago that so many of the issues we have to deal with as activists are fairly grim. It's child abuse, death from refusal, shunning, or something like that. So it's fantastic to get a major Watchtower scandal that is so freaking funny. It has been one of, if you go onto XJW Reddit right now, it's wall-to-wall jokes about people boffing pillows and edited shots of the governing body running around with pillows. And it's almost like kind of everyone's kind of got in on the joke. And the fantastic thing is that I guarantee the governing body and they will not get what's funny. My sense of it is they will not understand why everybody is bent absolutely hysterical laughing when they see these videos. I mean, I went through, I mean, Lloyd, you and me have done quite a detailed analysis of them. You've done a really in-depth one, and I've done kind of a fairly long article which touches most of the points which I encourage people to read. But I think the thing I just like to start by saying is I'm so grateful to the governing body because I have not laughed this hard in months.
Well, they're doing our work for us, aren't they? I wish that they could be this open when it comes to what's going around in their warped minds more often. Chloe, were you surprised when you saw the video?
I was dumbfounded that they actually put something on video saying, being as blatant as they were and as explicit as they were, because I know that we've had before, there's always a lot of talking about masturbation and all this kind of stuff, because I grew up as a teenager, so the young people asked books were often brought up and there were always talks about it, but it was never as explicit and as clear and as obvious how kind of messed up the whole thing is, really, what they're telling people to do. And also, I was really shocked as well that they had sort of talks that were especially for Bethelites, and once more that they had separate talks for men and women. They're not even showing them the same content, which is strange to me, as we'll go into a little bit later. But I was shocked because I just thought, really? Are they kind of that stupid? They would just
they are. Oh yes, they are that stupid.
But it's like not even smart cult leadership. It's just like, like you said, making the job very, very easy to show you how you could show other people stuff like this, and it's not a complicated topic whatsoever.
I can remember being in a Kingdom Hall towards the end of my time as a JW when they were actually going through the I forget the name of the book now. It's the white book that has the whole section on masturbation. I can't believe I've forgotten the title of it.
The white book.
How to Remain in God's Love.
Yes, thank you.
Or Keep Yourselves in God's Love.
Keep Yourselves in God's Love. That's the one. And it was just so cringeworthy to have this entire room full of adults and children going through this subject, and you're just looking at the kids thinking, how on earth is this appropriate material to be subjecting children to? But of course, this is within a Kingdom Hall setting, and it's something that JWs are used to, but it feels as though this material is a real gift, because it's something that we can show to outsiders and say, look what JWs have to put up with. Kamden, one of the things I'm most fascinated to ask you about, you've been in Bethel until fairly recently. You know the culture. You've been through the Bethel entrance training. How accurately does this material reflect your experience?
Very much so, but this is far more blatant than anything that I experienced. So, from what I remember, Bethel Entrance School was very dependent on who you got as instructors. So it was broken up into 4 different sections, and those 4 sections had 4 lessons taught by one person. So you'd get 4 different instructors throughout those 16 weeks of training. And so depending on how Gary Bro-esque your instructor was, it could be a very normal experience where you're talking about pretty practical things, or you might get someone who's just got a little bit of a bent towards something weird, and you go down some really weird tangents. And you'd hear stories from your friends who had been through an entrance school where they had an instructor like that, who had some instructor go off on a certain band or a certain type of music or a certain sexual practice, or just loved to go down one of these weird tangents. So with these videos now, fortunately for all new Bethelites, they all get to go down the crazy, awkward, and somewhat depressing tangent of extreme detail on some of these habits. So what is notable to me is that now we've codified the weirdness and make sure that everyone gets equal weirdness instead of it being more dependent on who you end up interacting with.
And as an ex-Bethelite, if you could describe what impact these videos will have on people joining Bethel, how will they be reacting?
It's hard to even describe how much fear and stress and guilt this has on people. It really is. And we would kind of go through phases where Gary Bro or someone else like him, who he kind of reminds me of Trump in a way. Like, I don't know if you guys saw over in the UK, but when Trump had 2 Native Americans in the room, he could not help but make a Pocahontas joke. It's like whatever is the most obvious gorilla in the room, he has to go for it. And that's how Gary Bro is. Any scripture that even remotely stands on the outskirts of something that could go down a sexual tangent, he has to go there. And it's like a sign of his manhood that he's going to be able to sit there and talk about something bizarre and overly particular and be able to hold a straight face.
Do you think that's fascinating? Because just to give you some context, we've obviously been talking about these videos for the past few days now, even long before the videos surfaced on YouTube, because we've been kind of handling them. Well, not that long, but we've at least had some time to digest them. And we've been kind of speculating as to who actually wrote the scripts. Now, it's noticeable. We're going to go into the differences between the 2 scripts, but for example, Ralph Wall's script is 20 minutes, Gary Bro's script is 37 minutes, so nearly double the length. Do you think it's possible that Gary Bro actually wrote this script?
I would say I'm 90% certain he did. If he definitely, anything like this would have to go and get approval, definitely before the personnel committee, if not the governing body as a whole, because I'm assuming they would consider this to be spiritual material on some level. But the idea that Gary Bro wouldn't have been responsible for this doesn't seem conceivable to me. As head of the service department, these are his stories. This is his day-to-day work. Mm-hmm. He gets to hear all of these and has a whole quiver full of crazy stuff like this. So these experiences definitely came from him and his department. And to me, just the style of it and the way it was written had Gary Bro written all over. And if I could also go back to the effect this has on people, we would go through waves where maybe a talk like this would be given, or morning worship, and suddenly there would be this mass bum rush of poor young brothers who now go in to their overseers and confess these complete non-events of, oh, maybe I grazed against the wall one time and became aroused, and now I feel guilty about it. And I wasn't guilty about it, never would I have been guilty about it, except for this bizarre talk that was just given. And so now you have all these young brothers going and confessing these things. And so the guilt and the fear is absolute mental abuse on a large scale.
Wow, because we were wondering, like, when they talk about brothers, don't have sex with your pillows, and we were trying to work out how on earth do they know that there's this epidemic of people having sex with pillows sweeping through Bethel? I mean, are they checking laundry with a black light or something? But what you're suggesting then, Kamden, is that what might have been happening is they're making people feel so guilty about any kind of sort of sexual feelings or activity, that there might even be brothers just going to the elders and saying, I feel so guilty because I've been rubbing myself with my bed linen and getting aroused. And then they've kind of got this vicious cycle of forcing people to confess. So they get all these stories and they use those stories to make more people confess. Is that kind of what you think's happening?
Absolutely. I know that's what's happening because it's happened to me. It's happened to friends. And you would see this happen to large amounts of people. And most of them would not have to leave Bethel, would not lose any privileges because there's nothing you can do. There's no sort of punishment that could be handed out for most of these things, but they would receive, counseling, if you will. But yeah, no, it's definitely what's happening. And the more stories you leak out like this, and you saw in the video, their exceptional use of questioning. What have you done to make yourself feel disgusted by this practice? If you feel that you may have weaknesses in this area, talk to the elders. They make it so open, and you have so much guilt that you have to go speak. And the more they do this, the more stories they have, the more they can relate these very strange stories, and the guilt cycle just keeps on going in circles ad infinitum.
It's almost like he's really enjoying it or something.
Yeah, it's hard to tell what's on his mind, but he definitely is good at constantly coming back to this tactic.
I guess this is one of those areas where it's useful to actually hear from someone who is. I'm taking it that you've kind of spoken to Gary and had personal contact with him, and been on the receiving end of his lectures. I guess when you do have that contact, you're going to have a better insight, because when I was watching the videos, I mean, probably John, Chloe, and Covert, you would have been the same. This is like the nightmare talk that you dreaded getting as a JW if it was a theocratic ministry school and you saw this kind of talk that was coming up on masturbation or whatever. You'd do anything you could to get out of having to give it. And I was almost feeling sorry for him, but after what you've told me, Kamden, I'm thinking, well, there's absolutely no reason to feel sorry because you've probably written the damn thing. So.
Yeah, no, Gary Bro is the military sniper, and he was just given a target at 300 meters, and he was happy to have to sit up there and calculate and figure out how he's going to hit that target.
Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought he made an interesting point towards the end of his talk after all of the various vices that we'll get into, such as lap dancing and, having relationships with pillows. The one thing he said was he asked
I'm
the
not
question.
planning on
Platonic
getting into
only, I
that too
swear.
much,
It's a
by the way.
platonic relationship.
He asked the question whether a man can continue to hold responsibility after having engaged in any of these types of behaviors. And the answer was yes. You just need to confess them. You need to bring them out into the open, which means that they have to discuss these things with either the local elders or Bethel elders, and maybe even Kamden can discuss a little bit about that, because there is a difference between an elder and a Bethel elder while you're serving at Bethel. So you have a lot of elders that you ultimately need to confess to. But what's interesting is similar with child abusers, many of them have been allowed to stay in their positions in the organization despite having engaged in behavior which Watchtower calls brazen conduct. And this, of course, is in the case of child abusers, has resulted in additional victims being abused. So I wanted to see what your thoughts were that one, Kamden, about how many were actually asked to leave Bethel because of various acts of brazen conduct, and how many were allowed to stay after confessing what their sins were.
It's difficult to know because you would have a lot of friends that would just kind of leave on a short notice and be like, "Hey, man, I'm leaving," and there's a very sullen thing. And of course, you're not going to ask what happened. You're assuming, okay, well, they need to go get help, they need to go home, and they'll be okay. But you never knew the circumstances behind that. The tricky part with this whole thing is they're pushing people to confess these, again, non-events, things that are not, they don't even have the authority to act on most of these things. So in a lot of these situations, they end up asking the person if their conscience will allow them to continue serving as a servant and bethelite, or just a bethelite if they're not appointed. And then it's down to that person to say yes or no, and that ends up being the decisive factor. It comes down to, can they keep serving with a clean conscience? So in the end, these talks end up with a bunch of people in these poor elders' offices, and they can't do anything. In the end, it actually is, well, okay, thanks for telling us. Do you think you can keep going? And that's pretty much the end of it. If they say no, they leave. If they say yes, they stay, unless there's some other factor where they feel like they can tie it down to pornea, or they can tie it down to some other more grievous sin, as they would consider it to be.
So now that we've kind of established that, well, we've learned a lot actually, or at least I have, about the likely origin of these talks and the kind of mindset behind them. Let's talk, if we can. Let's talk, if we can, about the talks themselves. So to recap, you have a 20-minute talk by a middle-aged guy, shall we say, directed at women and their sex lives, and then you have another talk that's much longer, directed at men and their sex lives and going into much more detail. How can we, for anyone who is watching this video who hasn't seen them yet, how can we sum them up? And what does it say about the control that is inherent in the Jehovah's Witness religion?
Well, I think one thing you could say is that Jehovah's Witnesses certainly have a stranglehold on their own view of morality and what the Bible's view of morality is. And I think that, Lloyd, you've pointed this out in your rebuttal video, that nowhere in the Bible is masturbation mentioned. And yet we have more time being spent on the subject of masturbation, unclean thoughts, relationships, tight clothing, underwear, and so forth. We have more time being spent on professionally produced videos than we do of all the comments that have been made about reporting child abuse. Yeah. So the imbalance is just unbelievable that they would spend this much time on these non-issues and yet not have detailed videos describing exactly what Christians should do if there's an allegation of child abuse. They just have a few elders' letters, and they keep revising the policy, and they keep paying lawsuits one after another. And so there's a great deal of imbalance there.
And that, for me, was the biggest thing, that although this is very funny, like we were talking about, it's also really infuriating that, okay, we're talking about two things to do with of a sexual nature. One does not hurt anybody and actually is probably very good for each individual that practices it. And the other is completely inappropriate and criminal and damages people for their entire lives, possibly, and multiple people. There can be many victims in that circumstance. So it's actually really infuriating. One is against the law as well and is disgusting, and they don't put as much emphasis on that, which is really, it's phenomenal, really.
We're going to be talking about the Ralph Walls talk a bit later, Chloe, because one of our voicemails touches on this, but I know you were particularly annoyed at the way that female sexuality was dealt with, or dealt with differently to male sexuality.
Yeah. Well, yeah, basically it felt like we don't have any, really. We're just there for men's satisfaction only and not sexual creatures at all. And apparently men are always ready to have sex and women are not. And really, we just need to watch what we wear because it could make someone else horny.
Now, I understand, Chloe, that you had to go back to a 1961 Watchtower to learn a little bit about what men are like. Isn't that true?
I mean, yeah, and also cooking, staying at home. That's also part of the deal. I guess it's just really phenomenal that we're in the 21st century and there are plenty of powerful women out there, and there is science to back up the fact that it's not necessarily that just men think about sex and women just comply. It's not that at all. So it was strange, but I guess they don't understand because two middle-aged men gave the talk, so they don't understand women at all, and it just that's preposterous. There's no words.
That was one of the most outrageous or bizarre aspects of the Ralph Walls talk, was the way he kept dredging up material from the 1960s. Yeah. And you're thinking, if the faithful slave has been keeping on top of this the way you claim it has, why all these items from the 1960s?
I mean, sorry.
No, go on.
They operate Bethel like it's in the 1960s too, though.
True.
From what I remember, housekeepers. How many male housekeepers are there?
True. Yeah.
Almost none.
Yeah. So,
well, Kamden, you can answer that, can't you?
Just Ralph Walls. He's the head of the department.
Right.
There you go. So he's running an operation full of women cleaning and being there ready. I just pictured like the old style, like American commercials where they had like, they're advertising cleaning products and she's just there waiting for her husband to come back. And it's just like, that's not how the world operates now. And it's really inappropriate, but I guess they don't think it's as much of a problem with women. And also, the difference as well that annoyed me most was that they called it self-abuse for women, and I didn't hear them mention that for men. So, and they called it self-abuse or masturbating. So they mentioned self-abuse first, with very, very quickly as well. So it was like,
Although the self-abuse part reminded me of my MTS, my ministerial training school, because when we did the lesson on masturbation, they called it self-abuse then as well, and they were dredging up a load of old material. But I
think that's just...
Sorry, go on again, Kamden.
Self-abuse, so that I think they're afraid of the word masturbate. I think it feels... I think that they feel awkward using that word, so they use self-abuse so that when they're meeting with people, they don't have to keep saying the word masturbate over and over again. It gives them a nice out.
Yeah. I'm sure I had like PTSD around the word masturbation when I left as well, though. So because it was used so much there, it was kind of like a horrible word to use as well. But
I think I tweeted out somewhere, or I put somewhere online that watch this video and take a shot every time Gary Bro uses the word genitals, and by the end of the video, you will need a liver transplant. Because the way he says it is just so somebody's genitals, or it's really kind of strange.
Pausing.
Yeah.
He took a word that you might hear on an annual basis and turned it into like a buzzword for an entire video.
Yeah, it's just avalanche of genitals. There's a word. It's one of the things that struck with
that has put a really weird mental image in my mind, by the way, which I'm going to have to get rid of. But carry on.
I'm following the example that's set for us by Gary Bro. But one of the things is, obviously, I've kind of said a fair bit on this already on the article, so I'm not going to repeat the points I said there, but something occurred to me that I hadn't thought of before. And we're a PG-rated podcast, so I'll keep it PG. In the definition of porneia and masturbation, nowhere do they mention breasts. So and this illustrates the problem Watchtower have when they try to get pharisaical and lay down laws about what is and is not allowed. Nowhere do they mention that the touching of breasts or anything like that is either porneia or masturbation. So if you're a JW couple and you want to get a bit frisky but you don't want to get in trouble, according to this talk, you can do anything you want above the belt and it's fine. And additionally, if you're a same-sex couple who are JWs, but you're a bit, if you're a woman who's a bit confused, but you like other women, but you're a JW, you're not sure what you want to do, according to this talk, if you keep it all above the waist, it's fine because the breasts are not mentioned in the definition of porneia.
I'm going to have to contradict you there.
You're going to shoot. No. Do they not mention it?
I'm going to have to contradict you there because
I had this.
Just because it's not porneia doesn't mean you can't get in trouble for it. And this was an interesting.
This is what I was going to say.
Yeah.
We all know that in reality, yes, you would get into a lot of trouble. But by trying to make hard and fast rules in this talk, what you do is you open up loopholes that, yes, we all know that you would get into trouble for doing this, but it kind of illustrates the danger you get into when you try and make these tiny little micromanager rules that people start seeing loopholes. So even if they were to just say, look, use your own consciences, don't do what you think's unclean, and we trust you as adults to do that, it would be more intellectually honest, and then you just let people kind of make up their own minds. But by making these tiny, tiny little rules that are so obsessed, people will start looking for loopholes. So they looked at kind of, well, I can do this and I can get away with it because you never said that in your talk, did you? And it was just one thing that occurred to me. I mean, like you say, yeah, we all know you would get in trouble, but according to the rules he lays down in this talk, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
So have at it, people. Enjoy yourselves.
Second base.
It's this is where it comes. I mean, basically, every Jehovah's Witness needs to have a copy of the Shepherd Book. I'm sorry, but if that book is going to be used to decide on their fate, if they ever transgress the rules and commands of Jehovah's Witnesses, then everyone should have at least access to a copy. And this is one of the things I've been saying for so long now, is that you cannot have a secret code book of guidelines that only a privileged elite has access to if those guidelines are applied in every instance where there is transgression. And so, for example, you mentioned in the article about two guys masturbating in front of one another not being porneia. It may not be porneia, but it would probably be classed as uncleanness, which is a gross sin. So this again is why everyone needs access to it. If you can have your life ruined by transgressing the rules, you need to know what the rules are and you need to know what the penalties are. And it is entirely without justification for there to be this secret guidebook.
That comes down to like normal law as well. It's just if in criminal law you need mens rea and actus rea, so you need to have the thought that you know you're doing something wrong and then the act as well. So if you don't know you're doing something wrong, you can't be punished for doing it. It's not that you have no motivation behind it. So if you don't know the rules, what game are you playing by?
Well, here's the tactical advantage though. If as long as you keep people in the dark as to what the actual rules are, and then you release a video like we've just seen where you see that these men who are in charge are looking at granular detail as to what constitutes a sin, what that creates is the goal is to get everyone in a room confessing to an elder no matter what they've done. The goal is to push people into a room to lay out what they may have done, and that way it keeps those who are decision-making in control. You are never in control because you don't have the rules. You don't know how to work within the rules. They want you sitting in there and telling all of your past sins, quote unquote, so that they can make the decision. It's an absolute control factor.
And the fear of God.
Yeah. And that's why it's wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I guess it would be a good point to move on to our voicemails now. In the rebuttal, I invited you guys to phone in with voicemails. And by the way, the address is speakpipe.com/Cedars. If you send in a message, a few people are just using it to send in general messages. But if you have anything that you'd like us to consider, for example, in a future show, by all means, share your thoughts. But we have had 4 messages that we're going to listen to now. And I believe, John, you're going to play them for us.
I found these broadcasts disturbing for a number of reasons. First, because of, and it's no surprise really, but of how pathological the JWs present normal human sexual behavior. Something that should be pleasurable and fun and freeing is being associated with condemnation and divine judgment and fear and terror and uncleanness and all sorts of negativity, which is just not healthy for anyone sexually. And second, much more importantly, in my opinion, I found these broadcasts disturbing because of, well, frankly, the erasure of female sexuality, the presentation of female sexuality as being not an entity or a phenomenon in its own right, but entirely contingent on or existing for the sake of men's arousal. That, women, we don't masturbate, we don't have any interest in sex. These are all things that exist for men's sake. I found that idea offensive. And third, I thought that these videos were an excellent inside look on the sort of disempowerment that women who are Jehovah's Witnesses experience on a daily basis. It was very, very interesting to me that between the two videos actually differed significantly. The one for women was fairly short, and sort of ended with, don't wear tight clothes, don't look at pornographic thumbnails, and that's it. Whereas the men's video actually went into extensive detail on what constitutes pornea from a JW, elder, or judicial perspective. This leads to an environment in which you have men and women operating according to two completely different sets of information. A woman in this instance is entirely dependent on a man to interpret the consequences or to delineate the consequences of her actions, her sexual actions. She can't possibly know what exactly constitutes pornea. If she's entering into a consensual sexual encounter, or is engaged and maybe is coerced into a sexual encounter, she may walk into that thinking that she can't be disfellowshipped for something when she can be, whereas the man can. So it puts her in a position where if she has a guilty conscience, she needs to speak to a man, confess, and ultimately put herself out there for scrutiny and punishment. Whereas a man in this instance would know the potential consequences of his actions and would be able to prevent them from happening accordingly if that's what he desired. We're essentially setting up an environment. They're essentially setting up an environment in which men are the gatekeepers of knowledge for women's own bodies. And I found that extraordinarily offensive. You have people, the quote-unquote brothers and sisters are operating in the same place according to two totally different sets of rules, and the rules are only told to men and not to women. I found that extraordinarily unfair and disturbing. That's my comment on it. I don't think that it's fair that men should be the gatekeepers of knowledge, of the rules of this club that everyone is a part of, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what a fantastic comment. Just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it?
It's extraordinary that when you sit down and think about it, she's absolutely right about, I didn't think about this whole information aspect to begin with because I got to see both videos. So I didn't really think about that to begin with. But really, when you think about it, it's a systematic disempowerment of women throughout the entire organization. So not just with this, but also, when I was younger, I wanted to apply for Bethel, and I had all this, motivation to want to do good for Jehovah and go out and work really hard and be a part of the whole thing. And I very, very, very quickly realized that women cannot do what men can do in the organization. You have to be married. You need a man to do any of the things that you want to do as far as this is concerned. So not only is it offensive, it's completely disempowering, like she said, and it makes you, as somebody who's quite confident and wants to do well and is motivated, it completely demotivates you. So they're really shooting themselves in the foot with this kind of thing too.
I thought the caller was spot on as well by using the word gatekeepers, because again, it just puts men in the position of where they have this enormous power that they can use. Well, it's always going to be used negatively, but it also creates a perfect storm for men to play upon that power and to trick women into thinking that, oh no, this is okay because I'm an elder and I know the rules, and and then later on, when the woman finds out that it's not okay, she's then in this situation. So it just creates all sorts of scenarios for women to fall foul of the rules that they're not informed about, or at least not in the detail that they should know.
Yeah.
And it's all, and as has been pointed out by a number of people, this could ultimately lead in one way or another, lead in men not being in control, in the sense that if a woman's committed a sin and then has to confess her sexual sin to a man, and we've seen so many examples of this, not in some, so even abuse victims have no choice but to discuss the intimate details of their abuse to a man. But we know, we've heard, sisters, so many. If you look at if there are so many accounts from ex-Jehovah's Witness women who can tell you that I was sat in this room and I was talking about what the witnesses would consider to be a sin, either fornication or something else, and they felt that the elders were getting off on it, that they were asking for too many details, they kept pressing for more details, and they came out of it thinking those men were getting sexual thrills off listening to me talk to them, and it's a blatant abuse of power. And the way the entire confessional system of Jehovah's Witnesses is set up, there is no way for a woman to avoid that.
No.
Absolutely none.
No. And even as a victim, I have been a victim in a different kind of circumstance, but when you try and report that something bad is happening in the organization, it is always older men. So I was maybe 16, 17, 18 years old. I'm a teenager trying to say something bad is happening, please help. And it's men looking down on you, telling you you're wrong, just constantly. So imagine if somebody has hurt you. I know of friends that have been, raped in a certain circumstance, and they have to come and tell somebody about it. And then they ask all of these questions, and by the end of it, it's more disturbing almost than the actual event that happened. And then it makes people not want to come forward with things like this. So imagine then feeling so guilty. You go to an older, what do they say, a mature sister.
Yeah.
And then the mature sister says, oh, well, that's bad. You probably should speak to my husband.
Yeah.
Which is all that she can say.
Yeah.
So, John, on a lighter note, we have another message which is, I think, intended as more of a bit of fun. So, should we? But thank you very much for that last message. That was fantastic.
Hey, Lloyd, quick question. Would it be biblically considered pornea to watch a video of an elderly man describing sex acts in a very sensual voice? Just a thought. Thanks.
That's a very good question. It probably should be considered pornea because it feels, as Toni Morris would put it, very inappropriate.
Yeah. It's almost like the talk was giving people ideas as well who had not even thought about it.
I was in the room with that stripper. That's all I'm going to say. When he was describing that, I knew her name. She was red-haired. We won't go any further, but he painted a vivid picture. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, judging by some of the comments on especially the YouTube on the trailer video, the material has not had the desired effect, shall we say, without going into further detail. So, John, could you roll the next clip?
I have just watched your video on YouTube, and I'm based out of Houston, Texas. Don't quite want to say my name yet, but I go by Pot of Clay, POTOFCLAY. And as I was looking at this video, I thought about when I was a child or growing up as an adult, also in the religion. Every time masturbation or porn was brought up in the Kingdom Hall or the assemblies and conventions, all it ever made me want to do is go home and masturbate or look at porn, maybe. So it did the reverse effect on me. And I just wish that they would stop putting so much emphasis on masturbation, especially. And it's interesting what I haven't heard, and I do remember going through the Great Teacher book and saying that masturbation would lead to problems having sex. So, meaning if I became sexually active with my husband, it's quite possible that I would have problems having sex with him because I masturbated. They used to say that. I haven't heard that in a very long time, but it is very frustrating to see exactly how frank that they are being. And hopefully this video will be made available to other people. I will be on the lookout for it. And I definitely want to send this anonymously, actually, if I can. I don't know how, but I would love to send this out to a slew of people who I'm still kind of in contact with, who are still hanging on. But those are my thoughts.
Thank you. And just to confirm, by the way, the videos are now available in unedited format. We've actually embedded them. They are now on my RuTube account, which is a Russian video sharing website, and we've embedded them into the article, and hopefully it's only a matter of time before they become widely available in downloadable format. But the more people can see this, the better. And I definitely identify with what you're saying about reverse psychology, and especially with the fact that, you know, the more this gets mentioned, the more this gets dredged up and talked about, it does have an impact. And I think a lot of the reaction from the ex-witness movement, or the ex-witness community, whatever you want to call it, is a justified contempt of the what they've been subjected to, and, you know, what I've been subjected to as well in terms of repression.
I've got a question for Kamden, actually, on this subject. When we're talking about the backfire and the way these videos have been seen, Kamden, do you have a sense that kind of at Bethel they would have any idea of how these videos would have been treated if they'd have got out to the general public? Because from our perspective, it seems like they're very good at shooting themselves in the foot, but not realizing that they're doing it with this material. Do you think they're oblivious to how these things might be viewed, or do you think they don't care, or do you have a sense of that at all?
Delusion is a hard thing to get to the bottom of. I mean, that really, to me, is what it has to come down to. It's the same way that Tony Morris can't see his delusion in why God would accept the baptism of a 16-year-old who just wants his driver's license. They are so far outside of even their own beliefs and understandings and such when they're into this territory that it's impossible to explain from a normal psychological standpoint. Kind of going along with what she said and what you're asking, I have to wonder myself, because this is like, I was talking with a friend of mine recently who's been on Lloyd's channel before, and we were comparing this to like blowing one's nose. We're talking about a biological, basically, necessity. Like, if you don't engage in masturbation, your body has ways of dealing with it out of desperation. It'd be like having a religion in which it's a sin to blow your nose, and everyone has to walk around with stuffy noses all the time, which is terrible. And maybe you can ignore it for a good amount of the time. And then someone makes a video saying, hey, you know how your nose feels really stuffed right now? You know how bad that feels? You still can't blow it. You're drawing attention to something that will never go away, is not going to go away, and it ends up just making the situation worse. So as far as how they would expect it to be received on the outside, I just don't know, because I don't think they understand the issues involved with what they're even talking about.
I don't know kind of what your role was in Bethel, and we don't need to talk about that because, you know, we don't want to identify you. But are you able to give us some kind of sense of how leaks were responded to? I mean, obviously the whole leaks phenomenon has really grown over the last few years, so it's kind of more of a recent thing. But I'd just be fascinated to know what the kind of morale is like at Bethel when this sort of thing happens.
You know, they have no idea. The average bethelite, the average witness, has no idea about leaks, because, of course, they stay as far away from apostates as possible. The only insight I can give on that is, I don't know if you guys remember this, but before I was in Bethel, so we'll say in the somewhere in between 2005 and 2010, there was a big rumor going around the whole organization that the pioneer hours were going to be dropped to 50.
Oh, I remember
this was a big deal.
I can remember that. Yeah.
People were quitting jobs. People were changing their lives around in anticipation of this change so that they could pioneer. And they were saying, "Oh no, I have friends at Bethel. This is confirmed. We know this is real. We have the inside track." So in my first year at Bethel, Ted Jarris, a former governing body member who's now deceased, had a morning worship where he was absolutely livid with this rumor, claimed that it had been started by the apostates to demoralize Jehovah's Witnesses, when it turned out it wasn't true. He said they had never considered it. It wasn't going to change. And then he said, clearly we have a problem in this organization still. Our brothers and sisters have a problem with rumors and false information. So that's about as close as I've ever seen anything getting to talking about leaks or information that came from a source. Other than that, they just ignore it. I can guarantee you that 1% of Bethelites might know about the leak. Other than that, everybody's in the dark because they're at the mercy of whatever they're told.
And thinking about it, that makes sense. They have to be in the dark, because otherwise they'd be trying to get out as quickly as they could be, wouldn't they?
Exactly.
But I'm fascinated to hear that story about the pioneer hours, because I was a pioneer when that was happening, and I can remember that rumor. So it's interesting to hear the other side of the story.
Yeah, I can guarantee you that the governing body fumes when stuff like this happens.
I can imagine, yeah. Well, they'll definitely know about it, or at least you would expect them to know about it. So, John, could you play us the fourth and final message?
Okay, here we go.
Right, so I hope I'm not too late for this. I think this material is absolutely astonishing, and I can't believe that they spent time and money to make it. I just want to make 2 points that's more general about sexual repression in Jehovah's Witnesses. The first point is that it makes it a taboo topic, and the second one is that the mind games that they use to achieve this. So, because sexual repression, sex becomes a taboo topic, and this has 2 subtle side effects. So imagine even if you wait until marriage and follow all the rules that Watchtower lays out, it's still going to be hard to talk about sex just because it's a taboo topic. And I believe that communication is very important to have a healthy sex life, and this just makes it harder. The other subtle side effect is what if you are a kid born into Jehovah's Witness parents? You're not going to be able to talk openly about sex. How are you going to get a proper sex education? This is still not widespread in schools, or even worse, it can have other religious connotations. And then what you're left with, your peers or the internet. And I don't have to tell you how bad of an effect that can have on your image of sex. The other point is the mind tricks that they use to achieve this. So the first of all, they replace masturbation with self-abuse. That basically puts it on the same shelf as self-harm. This is absolutely absurd. It's just uncalled for. Like, who wrote this? And the other thing is they replace fornication with porneia, just so that they can redefine it. If you look up this word in the dictionary, it just means non-marital sex or prostitution. It doesn't mean nearly anything as much as they use it for like oral sex or anal sex. And how does not masturbating in front of each other not constitute that? I don't even. So this is just absurd. So all in all, well done on the 300 videos, Lloyd, and thank you for listening.
Well, thank you for that comment, and indeed thank you for all of those comments, because they were really insightful, and it's good to know that I have listeners and viewers who think about things to that extent. And again, I would agree completely that the repression that witnesses go through, I mean, it's not something that you think about quickly when you start waking up from your time as a witness. But the more you do think about it, the more you think, they really messed with my head and with my emotions, and this has had an impact on me. So again, you can understand the absolute contempt that many ex-JWs are having with this material, and combined with the relief that, again, the outside world is getting to see just how controlling Watchtower is in this regard.
And if I can make a completely speculative comment based on that, I've thought about this a lot as well, and I wonder whether there's a link between the sexual repression, the lack of sexual education, and the number of teenage pregnancies that happen amongst witnesses, and also those who've left, and then quickly that becomes an issue for them as well, because you don't get any education on how to protect yourself, you don't get any education on what's available to you, and actually you can't talk to your parents about it because someone could say something and then you could get in trouble, and then it's then difficult to have a conversation with any other adult or doctor about what you want to do as well, because you feel sort of like you're doing something wrong. So there's a lot of sinister things that can have an impact, which you wouldn't even think about collecting data to try and figure out whether there is a correlation there too.
Yeah,
it's definitely safe to say that witnesses tend to get married. I mean, just based on my own experience, by all means, you guys jump in. But you do seem to go to an awful lot of weddings where the couple are in their late teens, early 20s, and you have to wonder whether that would be the case if they had, if they weren't being sexually repressed.
Well,
I was a bridesmaid 5 times, and I left at 20 years old. So
yeah, I mean, there's so many. I mean, I obviously, again, keeping it PG rated and not giving any details, but I know more than one witness couple. They got married very, very young. Everyone, to me, it was obvious, like, those two people have nothing in common. They just want to have sex. They're just so desperate for sex, and they have got nothing in common. This is going to be a disaster. And I know of more than one couple for whom sex was a huge problem in their relationship because they didn't know, at the basic level, they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know how to talk about it. They didn't know what they could and couldn't do. They didn't know. I mean, this is coming out into conversation. You'd have a conversation with the guy who maybe was a friend, and you'd talk about it, and he'd confide to you certain things. And I'd think to myself, well, good grief, I'm a JW, and I'm not married, and even I know that this, that, or the other about sex, which you apparently don't know. It's no wonder that you guys are having trouble. And that what he talked about, that inability to talk about it, that kind of fear that you. As you said, Chloe, even if then someone then leaves the witnesses, potentially they carry that with them, and the damage goes into potentially future relationships. There's so much of being a witness doesn't end when you leave. You have to unlearn so much damage, especially because, something is kind of intimate and fundamental to many people. Obviously, I know there are some people who are asexual or are not interested in sex, and that's fair enough. But if you are someone who you do have an interest in sex, but it's been messed up in your head by this religion, that can actually cause you massive emotional and relationship problems going forward. And it all stems from this repressive, unhealthy attitude that videos like this display.
Yeah. And a comment on the definition of pornea and oral and anal sex too. When I used to talk to people like around my age, the ones who were getting married, they always just be like, "Oh, that's a conscience matter," or "That's that," and I didn't even know the rules, and I didn't even think about it, and that can cause people a lot of guilt too. And it's something that until someone clarified it after I left, I was like, "Really? Oh."
Well,
if I may, I think that this. Oh, sorry, Lloyd.
No, go carry on.
I think that we've hit upon a good point with the lack of education, and I think if we feed this back into what we've seen with these videos, Bethel has a very unique problem with sexual activity because you're ending up with 6,000 people, give or take, in the United States, plus Bethelites all over the world, from vastly different circumstances, all with lack of education. So you figure you've got, let's just take the sisters watching this video. I knew of sisters who got married at the age of 19 to a Bethelite who was maybe 10 years or more their senior. And they were raised in a very closed environment with very strict parents. And then here comes this dashing Bethelite who sweeps them off their feet, who's perhaps known them for a very long time, which is interesting on another level. And so they come into Bethel with very little knowledge of sex, relationships, maybe even not very good at making friendships on top of that. And now, as they get into this environment where they're around all these different people, maybe they're from a state where there wasn't many options for marriage, and they got swept off their feet by this Bethelite who maybe had trouble finding someone who he had things in common with on a different level. Now suddenly she's just in this environment where there's all of these attractive young brothers who maybe she finds someone who she does hit it off with better. And now that she's getting used to being with people, wow, look at this amazing world and all these interesting people. And while I was there were a number of incidents where there was adultery and 2 people got kicked out of Bethel and people lost their spouses, all because of lack of education. Really, people didn't understand what sex was. They didn't understand relationships. And now they're in this environment where it's arguably very important to understand how relationships work. And
presumably they don't tell you about that kind of in a formal announcement. Is it more like a grapevine thing where they say, "Oh, that sister, she's been disfellowshipped," or whatever?
Yeah, so disfellowshipping announcements at Bethel are given during morning worship, usually about 2 weeks after they left. The announcement always goes, "Such and such is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses and left Bethel on," and then they give the date. It was always like 2 weeks before, and they'd make sure they took their picture off of the telephone directory so that no one could go online and like check out these pictures. However, if you knew the people, or if people had somehow gotten the pictures ahead of time, it wasn't an infrequent experience to see a sister who got disfellowshipped and left. And then you look at a picture of her husband, and he's easy 15 years her senior. And then you look at the brother who was also disfellowshipped at the same time, and he was a young, good-looking guy. So this was a routine thing, and it all comes down to a lot of lack of education and then social environment. And the other side of this is it does create a lot of fear among people. You do end up with a lot of aloof single people who cannot have normal friendships with other single people because they are so afraid of doing the wrong thing. I once offered a ride to a married sister. She lived in an outside building at the complex I was at, and it was raining. I mean, you could see the building. It was, an eighth of a mile away, and it was raining hard. And I said, "Hey, I know that it can be weird. Would you like a ride over there? I'm going that way anyway." And she's like, she thought about it for a long time, and she's like, "Well, I'll sit in the back seat." So I had to drive her in the back seat of my car over to the building in the pouring rain, and I could tell she still was very uncomfortable by the whole scenario. So this is the effect that things like this have on the Bethel family.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It really is useful, by the way, to get those inside stories, because it just adds a whole dimension to what we're talking about. Go on, John.
No, yeah, it's an absolutely real effect. There's nothing abstract about it. Sorry, John.
No, that's okay. I really enjoy hearing the stories, especially from the era that you were in, because not much has changed. And I think that the aura around Bethel, the rules, the regulations have been going on for, since 1909, since they moved to Brooklyn. I spent a lot of time at Brooklyn and Patterson in the 80s and 90s when they were building Patterson. And, my friends that had come back from Bethel, they told all of the stories that you're telling now and that we're hearing about. The elders talked about the homosexuality in Bethel and how much of a problem it was. And I think it was interesting that, they had a rule and still have a rule to this day where a single brother can't be in a room with a single sister unless the door is wide open. So it's a door open policy, and that's in your Bethel guidebook. But two roommates, no problem, because it's expected that, homosexuality is not an issue. But here they're admitting that it is an issue. Another close friend of mine who worked on the building of Patterson, he was actually in our wedding, and is a very good friend. He's actually gay. He was disfellowshipped for being gay. But what he told me was that when he worked at Patterson, as you know, most of the starter Bethelites are going to end up in a 4-man room. And usually you're going to share a bathroom with multiple other individuals. And there were long lines for the shower, and it was basically long lines of naked men. And so what Gary Bro is talking about, if you watch those videos, is very accurate. And he's basically saying, don't look, don't linger, don't let this affect you. But it was affecting them. Now, my friend said, he had no interest at all, even though he was secretly gay, but he was a pioneer at the time. But he had no interest in these men at Bethel. But he said to me that this was a very easy opportunity for anyone who was gay or had that inclination to get involved in a relationship based on what they were seeing in the shower rooms, because quite honestly, there's no privacy. And also a lot of Bethelites learned to drink heavily when they went to Bethel. So you actually, and Gary Bro mentions the alcohol use and how that lowers the inhibitions, but he also implies that can cause a person to be inclined toward being gay by lowering.
I've actually heard that
over.
from,
you might have a comment on that.
Yeah, I've actually heard when I was a JW, I have heard some people. Well, let's just say that Gary Bro isn't the only Bethel ranking officer to imply that, because at London Bethel, I've heard some hilarious things, which maybe I can't quote word for word because, but yeah, the idea that normally straight men will, after a few drinks, suddenly become mysteriously gay when they were never gay before is actually quite firmly rooted in the London Bethel psyche. I heard some hilarious stories which I probably can't relate, but yeah, when I was watching Gary Bro say that, I was like, A, you're clearly not talking about theoretical scenarios, and B, you sound exactly like a few people I used to know in London Bethel, the way they talk about it as well.
I think Chloe has some stories.
I heard that, well, I wouldn't give specifics either, but I heard some very similar stories to Covert because I used to hang around with some of the Bethelites there, and there were certain teams that they used to say, these teams, oh yeah, they all have parties together, and they're, certain activities together. I mean, it's like a bunch of young boys going to college. That is the worldly equivalent. They're going there, they're experimenting, they're like, oh, no parents, we get to do what we want, we live by ourselves. And now, certain people are sharing rooms together who may be inclined to do certain things together. So there's plenty of rumors to that nature, and you would hang around with these people, and then they would talk about each other and that other person over there, and there's a lot of these. And did I hear you say that they would share rooms at Patterson too? Because they would have that kind of 3 brothers to a 2-bedroom apartment in London, and 2 of those brothers, if you're new, you share a room, you have 2 single beds in that room, and there's stuff is going to happen.
Probably the number of pillows you have is dependent on how many years service you've accrued. But
once you can be trusted.
But it was just reminding me of, that's not true, by the way. It was just reminding me of when Gary Bro, towards the end, was essentially saying that you can pray the gay away. And he was saying, oh, well, it's all about meditating on the Bible. And
just because you have gay thoughts, just because you're attracted to the same sex doesn't mean you're homosexual. Yes, it does, Gary. Yeah. That's exactly what it means.
But especially when
Mormon musical, just turn it off, just like a light switch.
Exactly, yeah.
Just go click.
But John, you were saying about the lines for the shower, and it just reminded me again, and I can't kind of reference it enough. My interview with Howie Rutledge Tran, where he was talking about his experience as a homosexual, as a gay man at Bethel, and how he deliberately avoided getting his shower in the morning when they had the shower lines, because he was so determined to, again, try and pray the gay away. And in the end, it was actually the intellectual journey that he went on that convinced him that the whole thing was just an enormous waste of time. But this whole idea that just by being more devout and more religious, you can be someone completely different and have different desires is just absolutely nonsense.
And I think it's a testament to how I know I worked with people at Bethel who were absolutely homosexual, and they were great people, great hard workers. And you think about the self-control it does take, and the sacrifice these people are making to be there, the sacrifice these people are giving to the governing body and all of these people to give work and to know that that there will always be lonely in that way. Like Howie, you think of the sacrifice that takes. These are good people. These are really good men. And it's so sad to see someone like Gary Bro dismiss them and insult them. It's awful.
Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong too, but they don't talk about gay women, do they? In these
No, they don't. That's true.
That doesn't exist either.
They don't mention lesbianism at all, so they're not really as interested.
I noticed that.
It's phenomenal the amount of sexism that is in this religion. It is, but you only pick up on it, I guess, if you're a woman.
And they don't make allowances for bisexualism either, do they? It's either gay or straight. There's nothing in between. It's astonishing. But anyway, I guess we'd better get on with our news roundup. This is a new feature that we're hoping to have on Watchtower in Focus, where Covert takes us through some of the stories that are happening at the moment aside from our main story. And Covert, I understand you've got 3 things to share with us.
I have indeed. First of all, we'll need an appropriate theme tune for Covert Fade introduces the news, but we'll dig one out later. Yeah, the first one is we've actually got for a long time, we've enjoyed talking about the 7 members of the governing body. They've got some affectionate nicknames such as the 7 Dwarves or the Unmagnificent 7, etc., etc. We're going to have to change all those names because there's now an 8th one. So, Brother Kenneth Cook has just been appointed as the 8th member of the governing body. Now, this is actually the first new appointment since Mark Sanderson. He was the most recent appointment in 2012. And so for a while, when Sanderson joined, there were 8. But then Guy Pearce actually died in 2014 when the numbers came back down to 7. So now we've gone up to 8 members of the governing body again. So this was announced on jw.org. Brother Cook, as he's referred to in the press release, was a helper to the writing committee, so he's risen up through the ranks, and he's been involved in a lot of what was come through the writing committee over the years. He's been a pioneer since 1982. He started serving in Bethel in 1984, so he's probably thoroughly indoctrinated, and he's probably thoroughly a company man and utterly institutionalized, I would imagine.
Well, we have an ex-Bethelite with us.
I was going to ask, actually, do you know him? Do you know Brother Cook?
Yeah, I've had a few meals with him.
Ah, cool. Spill the beans. What's he like?
Actually, like many people in the organization who, when you see them talk about a subject like we've just seen, is totally awful. Kenneth Cook in person is a very nice person, very kind man. Always came across in his teaching, very kind, very caring. Obviously, is a people person. Like he has a very soft demeanor, and I think really does take people to heart. Unlike people like Tony Morris, who is not an enjoyable man to meet in person in any way. So, yeah.
That's interesting because, sorry to interject in your segment, Covert, but...
Oh, go for it.
That's interesting because I have my issues with Mark Sanderson, but he's undoubtedly, when you stand him next to Tony Morris and Stephen Lett and what have you, he's undoubtedly more of a people person and more of someone who you would want to present on a video than the older kind of more eccentric members. So it almost feels like there's this kind of shift towards finding kind of members who are less outrageous and a little bit better at putting in front of the camera.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Kamden, were you aware that he was anointed while you were at Bethel?
I was actually thinking that to myself when Covert broke this news for me. I now feel like there was little inklings in my head that someone may have said something here or there, but no, I definitely wasn't. If you had asked me before, I would not have known.
Are there any, sorry, again, interjecting in Covert's piece, but are there any, because we don't know who the anointed governing body helpers are, so are there any that we should be keeping our eye on for future appointments?
I don't know. I'm sure there's different circles at Bethel. Some people love talking about this stuff. It never really interested me too much, so no, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Cool. No worries. So I'll conclude that because there's not really much more we can say about it based on the press release from jw.org. But what I will say, it's interesting you should mention he's actually in person quite a nice guy. I remember when we did Watchtower in Focus 2 with Paul Grundy, and he mentioned Terence O'Brien, who was on the face of the footage from the Royal Commission, a very duplicitous man. But Paul actually said no, he knows him, and he's actually a really nice, sweet guy. And it just kind of emphasizes what that cult mentality can take people who in most of their lives could be really genuinely nice people and make them, support and tolerate, really oppressive, awful policies. So, yeah, that's interesting to hear that. Well, hopefully, let's see. Maybe Brother Cook might be a force for change in the governing body. You never know. Let's.
Well, we're experiencing the generation of these governing body appointees who have grown up from childhood as Jehovah's Witnesses. It's not like, when I was a kid, you had the Fred Franz and, who go way back. But many of these appointees now are, in their 50s and 60s. And they've grown up with the indoctrination in isolation and insulation that many of us grew up with. In fact, Cook and Sanderson are just a year and a half to 2 years older than I am. And to think that these men are governing body members controlling 8 million people, it just boggles the mind because obviously when I was growing up...
John, are you getting a little bit jealous again on camera? It's quite embarrassing.
I am. If I had just waited and stayed in the organization, you guys could be talking about me.
Anyway, Covert.
So Yeah, so moving on. So that's number one. We've got a new governing body member. So the next two items are slightly related. The first one is that there's a very important ex-JW activist website, which is avoidjw.org. And it's an essential website because it hosts a lot of Watchtower documentation. Now, a lot of this is publications or things that Watchtower do put out to the public, so the public can get hold of this information. But it also has quite a few documents or letters that Watchtower tries to keep to itself because, amongst other things, it exposes the way that the organization handles child abuse cases. And for very obvious reasons, the organization doesn't want the public or lawyers or certain other people to see this because it's incredibly incriminating. Well, it turns out that the Watchtower have been actually trying to legally take action against this activist website. So the Watchtower, it appears, have started going after activists legally. There's a story in the Sunday Business Post in Ireland, which I believe also recently broke a story of a major Jehovah's Witness child abuse cover-up.
Which we covered on the show.
Exactly, which we've covered. The story basically says that the Watchtower have issued a subpoena to do under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and it's basically trying to identify people who've infringed their copyright. So according to this, what they're trying to do, because they are claiming that Avoid JW have infringed their copyright by hosting their information, they are trying to get it taken down and to also identify who he is or she is or they are. We're going to cover this story in a bit more detail on JW Survey because this actually has a number of really worrying implications. Essentially, Watchtower here is trying to go after people who are exposing things such as their child abuse cover-ups. So what we have is someone who is, essentially performing a public service and whistleblowing on corrupt religious behavior, and that religion is trying to go after that person or that people or that organization legally. I'm not going to go into too much. If you go to the Sunday Business Post in Ireland on the 28th of January 2018, you can read the details. But that's essentially what it announced to, is that the Jehovah's Witnesses are trying to go after the Avoid JW website.
And isn't there kind of a whiff in the article of there being also a concern that rather than simply being worried about copyright,
yes,
Watchtower is actually using the opportunity to get details about visitors to the website. So
yes, exactly.
Rather cynical, kind of sinister side to what they're doing.
Yeah, in fact, one could almost argue that they're, from what's happening, they almost seem to be more interested in getting the details of the people who go to the site than they are in actually getting that taken down.
Wow.
It looks, I mean, we'll go into more details on the article coming up, but this looks really, really sinister.
Yeah, so we are going to have an article dealing with this, hopefully, and I think, like you say, it touches on the next piece that you're going to talk about.
Yeah, we are going to go into this in a lot more detail very soon. Related to that, we're going on to continuing the theme of Watchtower basically trying to chase down its critics in the courts. Watchtower is also going after a book, the author of a book and his publishers that was published in Germany about 3 years ago. This is the third story. So there's an activist named Misha Anuk, who people may have heard of. He's written actually a very, very well-received book in Germany called Goodbye Jehovah. There isn't an English translation as far as I'm aware, but in Germany this book has sold really well. Misha's a very successful author, and he writes frankly about leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses, and also it contains some of his criticism of the religion. Watchtower are suing Misha and his publisher over what they claim is defamation and untrue claims. Now, this is an article, it was translated from Google Translate on medium.com. Misha wrote an article there. And again, we're going to have an article about this, so people can go to the JW Survey article and find it, or you can if you go to the XJW Reddit, there's actually a thread there that takes you to the article. In it, Misha basically explains what's going on. Watchtower are claiming he's defaming them, and they take issue with some of the statements he's made. Now, the first thing is Misha says he doesn't consider this to be a free speech issue, because as far as he's concerned, German law allows people to sue people who are claiming defamation. He's absolutely confident that he can defeat this in court, and his publishers are standing behind him saying, no, we can absolutely defend the claims made here. And to be honest, from what I can tell, it's a Google Translate, so it's a bit hard for me to understand, but I'm amazed that Watchtower are trying to take him on, because all of the claims he makes are easily demonstrable from Watchtower's own literature. So I suspect this might be another case of Watchtower cheerfully loading up a shotgun and then blowing its own feet off, which they seem to be quite good at doing in court. But nonetheless, here you have an example where Watchtower is trying to use the courts to silence its critics. Now, in Russia, Watchtower is claiming right to freedom of speech and saying, okay, you might criticize our religion, but you can't shut us down in the courts because that's against our human rights, which I personally agree with. You just because you don't like speech doesn't mean you can ban it. But and I understand that Misha believes there's not a free speech issue, so I'm not going to hit free speech too hard. But I would like to just point out that in one country, Watchtower is claiming the right to free speech, but in another country, it's trying to shut down its critics with the law. It's not just content to state its case. It's actually trying to shut him down legally. Mm-hmm. So what these two stories is actually, I find quite concerning, is there appears to be a trend. Both of these stories have been brewing for a while, but it appears that Watchtower, whenever the legal option is available to it, is more than prepared to try and go to the courts to shut down its critics, which I find, that's a hallmark of totalitarian ideology and worldview. We're going to be covering this in JW Survey, because I think this is something that needs to get a lot of attention, specifically if Watchtower starts to do this more and more. This is something that
I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to lie. It makes me a little bit nervous because with my work and with the channel, and obviously JW Survey is my website. So historically, since I began my activism, Watchtower hasn't been very litigious when it comes to pursuing critics and when it comes to pursuing apostates. Yes, I've had the odd DMCA copyright takedown notice. Yes, I've had issues with videos and copyright and what have you. And I even had JW Survey taken offline for 24 hours a few years ago. But I can, to Watchtower's credit, they haven't been too litigious. They're clearly litigious in lots of other ways, but not so far when it comes to apostates. Now, I really hope that these are just kind of glitches and isolated instances, and that this isn't a sign of Watchtower becoming more litigious, because it is a concern. But I guess we'll just see where things go. And I also like to think that if the worst comes to the worst, like you say, number one, it's Watchtower shooting itself in the foot, because if they come after me, that's a media story in itself, and I get to go to the media and tell them what Watchtower's doing, and as well, I'm also getting a great deal of support nowadays. So I like to think that, depending on what happens, I'll have a lot of people behind me who believe in what I'm doing and what we're doing and want to see it continue. But I'm very concerned about what we're seeing in Germany with Misha, and in Ireland as well, and we'll keep an eye on things, and I look forward to reading the JW Survey article when it comes.
Yeah, that will be coming very soon, because as you said, Lloyd, this is even if these are one or two isolated incidents, we need to draw a lot of attention to them, and we certainly need to draw attention to it if Watchtower's going to make. I think I'm going to finish with a quote from Misha here when he says that, in his opinion, this is a crude attempt at intimidation, part of a large-scale strategy to silence critics and dropouts. In the past, the public defamation and pathologizing of Jehovah's Witnesses critical of the religion as mentally ill was one of them. Personally, I see great parallels to the fair game policy of Scientology. So yeah, I think we'll have to watch this and see what happens. But that's the news roundup. That's everything I have to go through. And handing back to you, Lloyd.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for doing that. I enjoyed that. And I look forward to that segment again in future episodes. But I guess that more or less brings us to the end of this episode. I think what we'll do, as we normally do, is just do a roundup and just give our own summaries as to, going back to the Pillowgate videos, as to what our general thoughts are. So perhaps we can... I introduced you as Kamden. I should say that your full pseudonym is Kamden Pine, and as I understand it, you're hoping to do some activism, or you're perhaps already doing some activism. So perhaps in your summarising remarks, you can kind of plug that a little bit and tell us what your plans are.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm working on a blog currently, and I'm hoping to attack it from the angle of skepticism, looking at Jehovah's Witnesses' beliefs and kind of where they break down, and particularly if we take those beliefs and just use the way Watchtower presents them and take them to their logical end, showing how logically it just takes us to some very weird places. So that's going to be at friendlyjwskeptic.com. I have one post up there now. Feel free to read it and comment on it. And I hope to have more coming soon. And maybe I'll get into some explanatory videos as well. I enjoy teaching, so I'm hoping to make some of these concepts that can help people get out of the organization very approachable and easy to understand. I can also be reached on Facebook at Kamden Pine.
Fantastic. So with the plug out of the way, what are your closing thoughts about Pillowgate?
I'm glad it exists. I'm so glad that people can see this, because one thing that's very difficult, having been at Bethel for a while, is people do not really know the full fanaticism of Watchtower. The average Jehovah's Witness sitting in a Kingdom Hall listening to a friendly talk does not understand the full fanaticism and the depths to which the really hardcore, long-time Bethelite overseers are willing to go. And this leak really makes that clear for all to see. And that shocking feeling that people have seeing it, well, welcome to the life of a Bethelite, and welcome to really seeing the heart of your organization. So I'm just so glad it's out there. Thank you to whoever leaked this. This is invaluable for people to see, and I'm hoping it might help a number of ex-Bethelites to help their families to see exactly what they went through and why they might be so messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. And Chloe, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
Really just following on from those comments as well, that I'm thankful that it's out too, because it shows you the level of control that people want to have, that the governing body want to have over their members. And when somebody finds out that you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness, they say, oh, well, they're nice people. I see them with the trolleys. And that is not the be-all and end-all of it. It's not just about nice people there. People are really being calmed, and this is to the level that they go. And although it's funny, it's also very, very damaging for teenagers, especially going through this and then into your young adulthood. And also, it just draws attention to the sexism too, which again is something that I'm bothered about as well.
Indeed, well said. And John, do you have any thoughts? I mean, obviously, we can spend a little bit of time talking about the fact that it's Watchtower's loss that you never made it to governing body member. But that aside, do you have anything to share with us?
Yeah, I just think everybody needs to watch these videos. Go to the RUTube or the RooTube page where you've got them hosted. You can find them on JW Survey. Once we, I think they're mentioned in the article as well as your rebuttal video. But the amount of rulemaking on a monotonous level that's going on, I think is going to find its way into the latest copy of the Shepherd, the Flock of God Elders Manual, because there are so many things that Gary Bro discussed in these videos that are fine points that are just so many situations that, what constitutes porneia, what constitutes wrong thoughts, wrong conduct, whether or not something is a disfellowshipping offense or not. They're just doubling down on their rulemaking as well as their two-witness rule. And, Gary Bro, it's no coincidence that he was the guy who doubled down on the two-witness rule just recently. We covered that. But, I encourage everybody to go ahead and view those videos. And if you can get those into the hands of an active Jehovah's Witness, because actually I think a lot of active Jehovah's Witnesses, when they see this, they won't believe it. they might, if they don't see Gary Bro's face, they might not believe it's real. But it's very real, and it's it's very oppressive, and it leads to a tremendous amount of guilt from young Jehovah's Witnesses who are trying to stay what they call chaste and pioneer and do all of these things, and yet they have these urges, and they're being told that they can't exercise that in a normal and healthy way. So it leads to depression, young marriages. It leads to disfellowshippings, which is just devastating to young people in the JW organization. So my recommendation is get out there and watch the videos, pass them on to others, and let's keep the transparency going.
Indeed, and hopefully we'll have some more videos for you at some point, depending on how things go. And finally, Covert, what are your thoughts?
I'd like to share with you a vision and a hope I have, which is that from now on, every single episode of JW Broadcasting has a 5-minute section entitled, Is It Pornea? With Gary Bro, in which Gary sits us down and in his very serious voice outlines a scenario which is graphic, with his hands on the Bible, and then spends 5 minutes describing in exquisite graphic detail an outlandish and gymnastic, potentially sexual scenario involving dwarves on trapezes and people naked tap dancing and all this stuff. And then he looks at the camera and says, "Is it pornea? Yes, it is." And then they just cut back to Anthony Morris, and he carries on with the broadcast as if nothing's happened. I want something like that in every single JW Broadcasting from now on. So that's my wish. Steve, welcome to your 5 minutes of Is It Pornea with Gary Bro.
Wow.
And I will be happy, man.
Pornea?
Exactly.
What we need is Kama Sutra, the Gary Bro guide, don't we?
Oh God.
Oh, man.
An illustrated guide.
It's just going to be a guide saying, you can't do this, 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 you can do that, but you shouldn't do that, but you can do this, but you can't do that.
Amazing. So, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground, and wow, so much to go on. I echo John's sentiments that if you've not seen the videos already, definitely watch them, and if possible, get them in front of a JW, and just, I mean, I wouldn't expect anything to just be a magic bullet to years and years of indoctrination if someone's not in the right position yet to start waking up, but it might just put them on the path to questioning whether this really can be God's one true organisation. But I definitely appreciate all of the comments. Thanks to those of you who called in with voicemails. Don't forget to send more voicemails if there's something that you want to share with us, or you want the advice, or you want to just get something off your chest. The address is speakpipe.com/cedars. We'll even take requests of what is or isn't pornea. Whether we treat them seriously or not is another matter entirely. But thank you so much, guys, for joining me for this episode. Thank you, Kamden, Chloe, John, and Covert.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, viewers, I hope you found that enjoyable. Please don't forget to subscribe so that you can watch future episodes of Watchtower in Focus. And as always, thank you for watching.
Say to the world I'd die if we were falling apart. Going to work, smiling as we're falling apart. You lie to your friends as fine as you're falling